You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This recording was the conversation starter at our dinner and dialogue gathering on June 4th, 2025. Thanks for tuning in. Well, friends, here we are in this final week of this series on transformation. And before we go forward, I want to invite you to go back with me for just a moment as we summarize the first 5 weeks of this series. So we began this journey in week 1 by reimagining peace, not as something that's static or serene, but as something that moves. We said real peace comes when we stop resisting change, but counterintuitively, when we soften into it. That peace, perhaps, is what arises when we no longer need to grip so tightly to who we once were and can embrace who we're becoming. Then the second week, we talked about the spiritual path and how maybe Christianity isn't so much a gatekeeping religion as it is one beautiful language for naming the sacred. It's perhaps one poetry among many and can still be a viable option for those of us who want to use it today. The third week, we turned inward into the multitudes that we each contain. So those layered, complex, sometimes conflicted, parts of our identities. We said the work isn't building up a better mask, it's descending gently into our true self, beneath the performance, beneath the persona. It's the deeper me that we each contain. In the fourth week, we asked, well, what exactly are we becoming? What are we transforming into? We asked, what's the shape we're being asked to grow into? And we said, simply, we are becoming love. That's it. That's the whole project. To become love in the flesh, even in our wounded parts and even in the waiting. And last week, we said, everything is an invitation. Every joy, every heartbreak, every irritation, every laugh, it's all asking, will we open up? Will we let this moment shape us? So, all things considered, if we zoom out a bit, we might notice that each week has had sort of a theme behind the theme. A kind of background melody that's been running beneath the words the whole time. And that theme, I think, is this: a widening embrace. Transformation, as we've explored it here, is not some process of perfection. It's not about control or even about arriving to some destination. It's about becoming more spacious, more able to receive life in all its fullness, more available to joy and sorrow, to laughter and lament. John O'Donohue defines spirituality as the art of homecoming. And I wonder aloud with you all tonight, what else can we come home to, really, but the lives we actually have? Not the airbrush version, not the Instagram highlight reel versions, but the messy, complicated, ordinary lives. With their beauty and their aches and their half-finished prayers. I think many of us have been sold a version of transformation that's likely about shininess and transcendence. At least that's what a lot of popular spirituality looks like these days if you're paying attention. But my suggestion is that maybe transformation is far more grounded than that. Maybe it's what happens when we stop performing our worth, or when we stop pretending to be better than we really are, and we can drop the masks and are finally able to say, this is my real life. Present, awake, willing to be with what is in loving conscious union. For me, I often imagine the soul like a cavern inside the chest, a wide, echoing hollow that deepens over time. And with every experience we have, that cavern expands a little bit. The joyful ones open us gently. The painful ones kind of carve out, by grinding the edges of the rock. But all of them are shaping us and making us more spacious. And spaciousness is where transformation happens. Because the truth is, we're all carrying that Rolodex of moments in our minds, aren't we? Those memories that make us laugh and others we've locked behind heavy doors. But even those locked away ones, they've been carving us too, making more room in the cavern and making us more human all the while. This room within us, I think, is where we grow to have space for all kinds of new things that life throws at us to exist within a widening inner embrace. So then transformation, I think, always comes back to this question: will I widen or will I wall off? Will I open to love or will I shrink in fear? That's the whole thing. That's the spiritual path. To keep choosing love, to keep choosing presence, even when it's hard, and especially when it's hard. To finally be able to say, as author Frederick Buechner once wrote, "Here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Don't be afraid." So let me pause here and say, I hope that none of this is actually theoretical for you. This widening, this soul deepening happens actually in the concrete places of our lives. I remember as a boy, my mom singing songs over me and rubbing my back as I drifted off to sleep. Bloop. The soul expands a little bit. I remember when I went through my first heartbreak. Bloop. The soul expands a little bit. I remember when I fell in love again. Bloop. Widening. I remember when I learned to tap into my creative spirit and access that excess of joy inside. A little widening. I remember when I got diagnosed with cancer and the arduous journey that followed. Bloop. Soul expands a little bit more. I remember when I would walk in solitude along the beach to pick up the pieces of my shattered soul in the form of sea glass. A little bit wider. I remember the good kind of weeping in the hospital room when my first child was born. Expands a little bit more. I remember when someone I loved dearly became frustrated with my growing journey and decided to say things that hurt me deeply. Bloop. A little expansion. I remember standing in front of the vastness of the wild ocean in Monterey and allowing the coast to restore me. Bloop. The soul expands a bit more. And, right? The reason I say these things is that this is just an illustration of a life. Transformation happens when we love and lose and love again and discover we're still here. It happens when we forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, not because they asked, but because our souls couldn't carry the weight of bitterness anymore. You know what I mean? Real life is its own sacred text, We don't need to escape life to become holy. Rather, the invitation is again so counterintuitive. We actually just need to embrace it. And that doesn't mean we celebrate the hard things. No, it means we grieve and we get angry and we cuss and we shake our fist at the sky and we do whatever it takes to hold on and make it through. This isn't about painting a brighter picture of life than is necessary or real. But what transformation is about is that we're each learning to welcome every experience as a teacher, even the ones that come cloaked in grief or confusion. Because transformation isn't a technique. It's not like a 3-step plan. It's something much wilder, much gentler, and much more subtle. It's something that happens when we let life soften us instead of harden us. When we surrender the need to have all the answers and learn instead how to let life open us to infinite questions. So the choice again and again becomes this: will I open or will I close? When I'm hurt, will I become cynical or will I become graceful? When I'm misunderstood, will I lash out or lean in? When life surprises me, will I wall up or will I stay curious? That's what the mystics and the prophets and the teachers and the poets have always invited us toward. Not certainty, but curiosity. Not control, but connection. Not coercion, but compassion. Not performance, but presence. And the astonishing thing is, this widening doesn't make us disappear. It actually helps us show up more fully to the full spectrum of life. We become more ourselves when we learn how to embrace more of the world. Because love doesn't flatten us into sameness. It frees us into a wholeness that's interconnected. And so I want to return to that image of the cavern inside of us. To me, it really isn't a cathedral. It's sort of a dark and echoing emptiness. You can kind of just feel the vastness of it, the silence. And the invitation, perhaps, is to sit down and light a candle. That's what our souls become slowly over time, not through perfection, but through the practice of saying yes to the fullness of life. We become that vast interior space where all our younger selves, all our heartbreaks and our longings and our joys can sit together in one place, not in conflict with each other, but in communion with one another. So here in this final week, maybe the invitation is simple. Not easy, but simple. To become people of a widening embrace. People who live with open hands. People who greet the world not with suspicion, but with a grounded curiosity. People who see others not as problems to be solved, but as mysteries to be honored. It doesn't mean we agree with everything, right? It doesn't mean we don't have boundaries and uphold them when we need to. It just means that even within our limits, love still has the final word. And the way of transformation is not up and out, it's down and in. It's not about ascending and getting out of here. It's about descending into the sacredness of the ordinary, into the mess, into the miracle, and into the mystery of our one wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver says. So my hope and my prayer for us tonight is that we might learn to say yes to our life's adventure in order to embrace the change, embrace the mystery, embrace the parts of yourself that we were taught to hide, embrace the sacred within the mundane, and embrace love as both the path and the destination. Because here is the world. Beautiful and terrible things will happen, and they will continue to, right? In our country, in Santa Barbara, in each of our lives. Don't be afraid. We're each invited to move with the trust that each of us are being shaped into someone who can actually hold it all and still call it home. Amen. Well, I'm looking forward to chatting about this tonight, so I want to offer up 3 questions for contemplation and conversation. First, the self question. What's one part of yourself, past or present, that you're learning to embrace and integrate rather than hide or fix? And how has that shift opened up space in your inner life? Number 2, the sacred question. Where in your actual life, not your ideal life, have you recently encountered the sacred in messiness, in stillness, or in a moment of unexpected grace? Third, the society question. What might it look like to widen your embrace in the face of someone or something in our world today that you instinctively want to wall off from? Or what fear, story, or reaction do you notice in yourself, and what's the invitation beneath it? Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, go to www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace and every good, y'all.